into this emergency declaration, and the ACLU says that it will sue President Trump. But President Trump, he predicted all of that when he made the announcement in the Rose Garden today.
We will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. And we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
With that, President Trump freed up about $8 billion for his border wall. That's on top of the nearly $1.4 billion deal just approved by Congress and signed by the president today.
We're talking about an invasion of our country with drugs, with human traffickers, with all types of criminals and gangs.
But Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee are accusing him of fabricating an emergency. In a letter to President Trump tonight, they say, "We believe your declaration of an emergency shows a reckless disregard for the separation of powers and your own responsibilities under our constitutional system." The letter also points to one statement in particular in which President Trump himself seemed to indicate that an emergency declaration was not necessary.
I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster.
Even some Republicans, like Senator Lamar Alexander, are calling the declaration unnecessary, unwise, and inconsistent with the U.S. Constitution. But President Trump had an answer for all those accusing him of making up a crisis at the border.
What do you say to your critics who say that you are creating a national emergency, that you're concocting a national emergency here in order to get your wall because you couldn't get it through other ways?
What do you think? Do you think I'm creating something? Ask these incredible women who lost their daughters and their sons. Okay? Because your question is a very political question, because you have an agenda.
President Trump was referring to all the Angel families in attendance at today's announcement. Some of those families later approached the CNN correspondent who'd asked that question, and he invited them to share their story on live TV.
This is my only son, Ronald Da Silva, who was murdered by a previously deported illegal alien. We need to secure our borders to protect American citizens. President Trump is completely correct on this issue. We need to protect this country.
So this emergency declaration is going to be hashed out in court and in Congress for quite some time, but at least Washington has avoided another government shutdown in 2 months. So there is that.
We're not doing that story tonight like we thought we might be, but the chaos continues.
It does.
All right, Kristen, thank you.
You bet.
All right, tonight's Power Panel to take this on, Democratic strategist Zach Friend, Daily Caller White House correspondent Sagar Enjeti, and President of Real Clear Politics, Tom Bevan. Welcome to all of you.
Thanks, Shannon.
We all saw today that the Angel Moms really became center stage there. I want to play a little bit of the reporting on CNN, and then I'll tell you what one of the Angel families had to say.
These are parents of victims who were allegedly killed by undocumented immigrants.
You also have women known as angel moms, mothers who lost children or alleged to have lost children to undocumented immigrants.
And that use of the word alleged did not go over well. One of the families told us tonight, when asked about media outlets that have been claiming this word allegedly killed, quote, "That is extremely insulting and hurtful. The previously deported illegal alien in our case has been convicted and is in prison. Saying allegedly is an effort to discredit our story. They don't want the stories of the Angel families to be told." Now, Sagar, you were there today. This spilled over post press conference. What happened?
Yeah, I saw the Angel Moms actually approach CNN's Jim Acosta, and they took issue with the tone of the question. What they see is an effort by the press in order to look at the things that are happening on the southern border and disqualify or to push back against the president's rhetoric that there is a national emergency. And to many of them, and I've spoken with some of them, I've met them. To them, this is a very personal issue. Their children or their husbands or their spouse were killed by an illegal alien, and so to see that discrediting of their narrative and a policy fix that they think that would work was very upsetting to them.
Yeah, I mean, Zach, how do you address this? Because the left is going to say there isn't an emergency, but to these people, they've suffered tremendous loss. It's very much a real crisis in their lives.
I agree with you, Shannon, and I think that that they deserve all the love and respect that they should be getting right now. I do understand, too, that in some respects what we're seeing here from the executive side is really a reflection of the gridlock on the legislative side. This isn't anything new. The President Trump isn't doing anything new. President Obama also issued similar executive actions. And I think that one of the challenges that we have here is really the precedent setting, both from Obama and Trump, and moving forward of whichever the next administration is how willingly they'll be able to do these things for everything from climate change to any other issue.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up, but you make a point here because the president said, listen, many other national emergencies have been declared. Many of them are still in effect right now from several previous presidents, so it's not that it's unique. But NPR says this, their headline, many presidents have declared emergencies, but not like Trump has. They want to differentiate it. This is what they said. About 3/4 of the time, presidents use their emergency power to impose economic sanctions or limit trade with foreign parties. Other declarations have followed terrorist attacks or natural disasters. Now, critics say Trump's declaration is categorically different in that the president is using his power to fund a border wall far bigger and more expensive than Congress was willing to pay for. Then they quote the California Attorney General Javier Becerra saying this is not 9/11. This is not the Iran hostage crisis of 1979. Tom?
Well, Trump is right. This is all going to get hashed out. You know, there's a Joe DeGeneva, well-respected attorney, wrote a piece in the New York Daily News saying Trump is on solid legal ground. There seems to be some consensus that he is on solid legal ground. But Trump's probably right. They probably will go to the Ninth Circuit, and they may not get a good ruling there. And this will be appealed probably all the way to the Supreme Court. So, you know, whether it's different or not, and the nuances of that will all be sorted out in court. But in the meantime, you know, Trump's going to try and move ahead as quickly as he can. This is his issue that he has to deliver on for his base, and he wants to set up this contrast between himself and the Democrats, particularly as he moves into the 2020 campaign.
Yeah, and Zach, we're going to talk about how the Democrats feel about this. I mean, there are those who are out there publicly saying that they would actually tear down the current existing border barriers if they had a chance, if they were elected.
Yeah, I don't actually think that's a particularly helpful discussion. I think that what you're starting to see, though, is people that have a primary voter audience, and then there's going to be a general election voter audience. And we have to remember, by the way, a decent amount of this wall was actually constructed during the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. Both parties have actually built portions of the wall. I mean, I'm from a border state, and I think that people do feel that there is a value to having border protections. The question, though, sort of on a macro side, is this the highest, best use of the time right now of either Congress or the president to be focusing specifically on this? I think there's agreement that we need comprehensive immigration reform. The question is, do we necessarily need to be spending all this time on this one issue associated with immigration?
When Democrats were in control, they didn't get it done. Republicans in control, they didn't get it done. Sagar, The Atlantic says this. While the president does not need Congress's say-so to declare an emergency, Congress does have the right to override him after the fact with a vote of both houses. House will likely do so, unclear whether enough Republicans in the Senate would join them to do. You cover this. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that they would have the requisite number of votes, but even if they did, White House officials have made known, you know, on a background purpose that there would be a significant effort to rebuff any sort of vote, and that if it came down to it, that they would try, or they would at least have a major discussion about vetoing it. But they're not worried at the moment that that is something that is going to happen.
All right, quick final word to you, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to get one of the things that this does, though, after Trump had got a pretty significant bump after his State of the Union address, which was well received and had a bipartisan message, Trump is back to brawling. And this is certainly going to put the focus back on the split within the Republican caucus. You mentioned Lamar Alexander earlier. And that's not a good thing for Republicans. It's not necessarily a good thing for Trump.
Well, I think he likes to be in the brawling position. That seems where he's most happy and most comfortable. All right, Power Panel, thank you. Please stick around and come back. We've got more to discuss with you.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, tonight, it's becoming clear that 69-year-old Paul Manafort will likely spend the rest of his life in prison for not paying taxes on millions he earned overseas, for lying to banks on loan applications, and lying to investigators about communications he had with a Russian translator. Special counsel team led by Robert Mueller is recommending Manafort serve between 19 and 24 years in prison and pay up to $24 million in fines. Also tonight, special counsel Robert Mueller claims in a new court filing that prosecutors have evidence that former Trump advisor Roger Stone did communicate with WikiLeaks, the organization that released those private Democratic emails during the 2016 campaign. Stone, who was indicted last month on charges of obstruction, making false statements, and witness tampering, denied to Fox that evidence of such communications exists. Well, next, we take you directly to the southern border for a behind-the-scenes look at the danger and chaos border agents are facing there on a daily basis. And then an exclusive interview with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the criticism she's getting about, Amazon canceled its New York expansion after her lobbying efforts. They're taking 25,000 jobs with it. And Rush Limbaugh weighs in.
When you actually try to extract the details of this deal, all of a sudden the math got really fuzzy and it felt to the community that the details were falling apart.
I find it comically hilarious.
And a late-breaking twist in the investigation into actor Jussie Smollett's alleged beating. Details just coming in. They're right after the break. Tonight, we were expecting a press conference from Chicago police on the case of Jussie Smollett, the TV star who says he was attacked by men who were screaming racist and homophobic taunts. Well, it appears that Chicago pressers on hold in the wake of the deadly shooting in Aurora. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt, though, has more on the Smollett case and some interesting twists today, Jonathan.
This case, Shannon, truly becomes more bizarre by the day or even the hour. Two men were being questioned by Chicago police today. Tonight, they were released without charge. These are the same two men who were initially detained on Wednesday, described by police on Thursday as persons of interest, formally arrested as potential suspects this morning, Friday, and now tonight, Friday night, they're free men again, with a Chicago Police Department spokesman saying that, quote, due to new evidence as a result of today's interrogations, the individuals questioned by police in the Empire case have now been released without charging, and detectives have additional investigative work to complete. That statement coming just hours after Chicago police said they had, quote, probable cause to believe the suspects committed assault and battery against actor Jussie Smollett after he left a Subway sandwich shop in Chicago in the early hours of January 29th. The two men, again now released, are apparently brothers. They are originally from Nigeria, and police say at least one of them worked with Smollett on the set of the Fox TV show Empire. Now, in the early stages of this investigation, police released security camera images of two men they said they wanted to talk to. Jussie Smollett was asked in an ABC News interview this week if he believed those two were the men whom he says attacked him, used racist and homophobic slurs, put a noose around his neck, and shouted, "This is MAGA country."
I was there. For me, when that was released, I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. I don't have any doubt in my mind that that's them. Never did.
Now, there have been reports, including from our own reporter Matt Finn in Chicago, that police have been looking into the possibility that the entire attack was staged. But yesterday, a spokesman for the Chicago Police Department said those reports were, quote, unconfirmed, and Smollett is still considered a victim in this case. You truly could not make this up, Shannon.
We'll stand by because, of course, there's an ongoing investigation. We'll see what we learn. Jonathan, thank you.
Sure.
All right, the U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether the 2020 census can include a question about citizenship. That, of course, could affect the allocation of seats in the House of Representatives and the distribution of billions of dollars in federal money. The justices have agreed to a speedy reviewing of a lower court ruling that has so far blocked the administration from using that citizenship question, adding it to the census for the first time since 1950. Well, new reaction tonight from 2020 Democratic hopefuls to President Trump's emergency declaration to funnel more federal dollars toward a border wall. As David Spunt reports for us tonight, some say if they're elected, they're actually open to tearing down the current barriers. All right, David, what are you learning?
Hey, Shannon, well, we've heard from Democrats on the campaign trail. They've made it pretty clear they do not support President Trump's wall, but tearing down an existing wall, well, that's a new rhetoric emerging, and it's moving the political meter as we inch closer to the 2020 election.
Thank you very much, everybody.
As President Trump works with his team to build a wall on the Texas border, several Democrats are now on record saying what goes up must come down.
If you could, would you take the wall down now? Here.
Yes.
Like you have a wall.
Absolutely.
Knock it down.
I'd take the wall down.
A new position from Beto O'Rourke, possible presidential candidate and former Texas congressman who represented El Paso. He doubled down on his comments this afternoon on a trip to Milwaukee.
We were safe before there was a wall in El Paso. We were safe after there was a wall in El Paso. In fact, we were slightly less safe after the wall was built in the El Paso sector of the U.S.-Mexico border.
O'Rourke's comments became questions for other presidential candidates.
So I could look at it and see which part he means and why, and if it makes sense, I could support it.
Other candidates like Kamala Harris denounced new construction, but stopped short of calling for a dismantling of the current border wall.
Beto O'Rourke said that he would support bringing down existing barriers. Is that something that you would support in California?
I believe that there is a need, and always should be a need, and we should create as a priority border security. Border security should always be a priority for our country.
The spending bill that President Trump signed will build 55 miles of border wall by declaring a national emergency. The president expects to see hundreds of more miles built. Shannon.
All right, David Spunt, live for us tonight. Thank you. All right, we've heard the president and the Democrats hoping to run against him give their very different views on the situation at the southern border. Tonight, correspondent Casey Stiegel shows us really what's happening at one major crossing, so you can decide for yourself.
Here in Eagle Pass, Texas, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials face the arduous task of processing each caravan migrant, which involves feeding them and then conducting a credible fear interview to see if they qualify for asylum in the U.S. If they do, they're sent to a U.S. detention facility to formally begin the process in.
Well, what's to stop a future Democrat commander-in-chief from doing the same over guns or climate change? How worried should conservatives be about the president's use of executive power? Plus, President Trump may have a 2020 challenger on the Republican side. Why is a former libertarian vice presidential candidate considering an inside move on the president?
Our country is in grave peril, and I cannot sit any longer quietly on the sidelines. Our president is simply too unstable to carry out the duties of the highest executive office in the land.
Time now for 2020 in 60 seconds. Just over 2 weeks into her presidential bid, Democratic Senator Kamala Harris sounding the alarm, reportedly sending an email titled "Falling Short," claiming that her campaign is at real risk of not meeting a February fundraising goal in time for its next Federal Election Commission report. Well, President Trump getting his first potential GOP challenger. Former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld announcing today, quote, "I cannot sit any longer quietly on the sidelines." Weld is launching a presidential exploratory committee to count the cost of a 2020 run. He was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee in 2016. And 2020 Democratic candidate Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard clarifying comments she's made in the past, causing some to question her stance and her relationship with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The Hawaii Congresswoman saying now that Assad is a brutal dictator, but she doesn't believe the U.S. has the right to force a regime change. All right, tonight's Power Panel tackling another 2020 story of the day. Democrats saying not only they will block future border barriers, but they're up for taking down the ones that exist currently. Democratic strategist Zach Friend, Daily Caller White House correspondent Saagar Enjeti, and president of Real Clear Politics Tom Bevan. Welcome back to all of you. David Spunt reported for us a short time ago. Beto O'Rourke clearly said that he is all for this. Senator Gillibrand, who's also running, has said she'd have to look at it, but she kind of, is okay with the idea as well. Senator Tom Cotton, of course, a Republican, tweets this: "Give Beto O'Rourke points for honesty. He admits that he wants to tear down existing border walls and have totally open borders. At least he'll say what most Democrat politicians believe." Tom?
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats complain, Trump's out there saying they're for open borders. If you don't want to be accused of being for open borders, then don't be for open borders. I mean, the Democrats have done this on the immigration issue and on other issues. They're making a caricature of themselves and their positions on the Green New Deal. But with regard to immigration, abolish ICE, defund Homeland Security. This is not where Democrats, where the mainstream of America is. It might be where the mainstream of the primary voters in the Democratic primary are going to be, but they're doing Trump a favor by going too far to the left on this issue, and I think Beto O'Rourke really stepped in it this weekend.
Well, Zach, I mean, what about that? I mean, there are some on the left who are complaining about the way they're being portrayed, but if you're just quoting them or putting their quotes out there, can they complain about being viewed as too progressive for the average American?
Well, that's fair, Shannon, but I also don't think that this is necessarily where the majority of the Democratic Party actually is either. What's unclear is whether it's even where the majority of the Democratic primary voters are. I think what Senator Harris said is actually where the majority of people are, which is, I think that most Democrats believe that we've built it in the locations that make the most sense, and the question is sort of on a more macro side is where do we actually add additional resources moving forward. It'll be unclear. By the way, Congressman O'Rourke isn't actually running for president yet, so we'll see whether or not he's actually running, and we don't know what we'll actually make of it. But what I do think is important is that this does put a flag in the sand as far as positions go that will require all Democrats to have to answer in the primary, and I think that makes it actually difficult in transitioning to a general election message that may or may not resonate through the industrial Midwest.
I mean, it's definitely a risk. All right, Saagar, I want to get to you on something that we alluded to a little bit earlier, but this is the idea that Democrats are saying, listen, if the president does this national emergency on the border, then we might be able to do it on a number of other things. Activist and actress Alyssa Milano tweets this, hey, real Donald Trump, maybe no one's told you, but declaring a national emergency for a wall sets a precedent that future presidents can declare a national emergency for health care, climate change, gun reform, all of which are more pressing and dire than what she calls his weird wall. Saagar.
Yeah, Alyssa Milano is actually in lockstep with many GOP senators and a lot of people who are privately whispering that what the president may have done is open the door to his successor, if a potential Democratic successor, for declaring a national emergency on gun control, on climate change. We already know that Nancy Pelosi, when she was discussing this issue 2 days ago, talked about how a real national emergency would be gun control. It could open the floodgates for the future of governance in the United States where nobody really wants to go.
Well, Tom, what about that? Because, there are other people, including, top Republicans who say Democrats are going to do it anyway, whether he does it or not.
Yeah, I mean, look, Obama did it in his administration, right, with the executive order on DACA. He said it was unconstitutional. He did it anyway because he was frustrated he couldn't get a plan through Congress. This is sort of the next natural progression. So we're already on that slippery slope. There are plenty of folks in Congress who think that Congress has already ceded too much responsibility to the executive branch, and every successive president seems to try and want to push the boundaries of executive power. So I think this is, we'll see whoever is in office next, and even beyond that, will continue to push those boundaries and exploit those opportunities where they can. So it's a slope we're on. It's certainly the natural progression of things.
Zach, I've seen the Supreme Court smack down executive power and the president's potential overreach in a number of cases, most recently during the Obama administration. What's your take?
I think that this opens up Pandora's box, and I quite frankly think that regardless of where you are on this issue, regardless of the legality of it, anything that you run on now will be open season for you just declaring a national emergency on in order to get it passed. I think that anybody in the United States, this should give you pause to actually think about it. This is what you really want in our constitutional system.
All right, Zach, Saagar, and Tom, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, you.
Shannon.
All right, a feminist suing Twitter after the social media giant permanently bans her for calling a trans woman individual a he. Well, she says Twitter isn't playing fair and is using its giant platform to bury free speech. Our legal eagles take up the case. You're the jury. Night Court is next. Now, a feminist and self-proclaimed leftist is suing Twitter. Feminist blogger Megan Murphy says Twitter banned her permanently after some tweets on the transgender debate. Twitter says she violated the rules when she referred to a transgender woman as he. All right, tonight's Legal Eagles, constitutional attorney Jenna Ellis and civil rights attorney Robert Patillo. Thank you both for being with us.
Thanks so much, Shannon.
Okay, I want to play a little bit of something that Megan Murphy, the woman here who is suing Twitter, has to say in a YouTube video. This is Exhibit A.
Countless users who post pornography and violent threats, both things Twitter claims are prohibited on the platform, remain on the site. In other words, Twitter ignores its own rules and policies and has not been transparent at all about its practices and refuses to be accountable for its ideologically motivated efforts to quell free speech.
What about that, Robert? Because it's something we hear a lot, that people say they're very precise about who they target, and it's often kind of viewpoint speech situations. But she says there are all kinds of violent, crazy terrorist people that are still out there that Twitter isn't cracking down on.
Well, one of the good things about this country is that it is a free country, and what freedom of speech is a freedom from governmental interference and an individual's right to free speech. Twitter is a private company. Just as if it's a restaurant or a hotel or a movie theater, they can regulate what they feel like on their platform. You have the ability to start your own social media site, your own Twitter, your own anything to get your opinions out there. But Twitter, you do not have a constitutional right to tweet. If you do not like Twitter's rules, then you move on to the next social media site or you start your own. You do not have a right to say what you want when you want. So if Twitter wants to enforce their rules against one individual and not against another, guess what? That's their prerogative because they built their own business, built their own website, built their own platform.
Okay, now, just so people know, the part of the problem here, or what sparked part of this, is that Megyn was referring to a case in which a person who was born biologically male and still apparently has some of the anatomy was scheduling Brazilian bikini waxes and then showing up as a woman and then suing people or protesting when people realized there was still some male anatomy and didn't want to perform the procedure. Megyn on Twitter referred to that person as he. Exhibit C, Twitter's policy says we prohibit targeting individuals with repeated slurs, tropes, or other content that intends to dehumanize, degrade, or reinforce negative or harmful stereotypes about a protected category. That includes targeted misgendering or dead naming of transgender officials. Jen, that's the policy.
Yeah, well, Robert is right that there isn't a constitutionally protected right here because Twitter is a private platform. But the users who sign up for the exact same user agreement still have a reasonable expectation that it won't be selectively enforced based on the exact same user agreement for one opinion versus another one. Megyn also posted that men aren't women. That's not even an opinion. That's simply posting facts. And so when Twitter is arbitrarily and capriciously just enforcing their user agreement for one person over another, then users have a right to expect that their same exact user agreement, while it's open to the public and that you sign up and you agree to the same terms and conditions, that it won't be enforced just based on one tweet over another.
Okay, Robert, quickly, has this become a public forum in the tradition that we understand it? I want you to respond quickly so we can get Jen to answer the same question, because there would be different rights there for discourse.
Well, no, it's not public because it's not funded by the United States government. It's a private platform, and they can enforce their rules how they feel correctly. As I said previously, this individual, Ms. Murphy, can, whenever she feels like, start her own social media platform. She was just on YouTube talking. Use that platform instead. We are a free country. People are free to run their businesses as they see appropriate.
Well, Jen, I mean, does she end up getting herself kicked off YouTube as well?
Yeah, well, this isn't a traditional public forum, and that's absolutely correct. What we're ignoring the fact is that there is still a user agreement, and Twitter openly invites the public to create the same exact accounts and openly publish their opinions and also facts, which it's true that men aren't women. And Jonathan, this individual, was going by his traditionally given male name. And so this is being selectively enforced, and conservatives are being targeted here. And so user agreements have to be consistently enforced, even on a private platform.
Well, Twitter calls these claims meritless. We'll see what the courts think, and we'll see what our jury at home thinks. Jenna and Robert, thank you both very much. Great to have you.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, tweet us what you think. Use the hashtag Nightcore to @Shannon Bream or @FoxNewsNight. Okay, coming up, Yale University under fire from a group of female students who say the solution to sexual assault on campus is to force male fraternities to admit women. Emma Michel and Ethan Behrman, well, they've got some opinions of their own. They join us next to weigh in. Yale University facing a legal challenge tonight over its Greek life. A group of female students says they've faced unwelcome sexual advances while attending frat parties and argue the only way to put a stop to it is by allowing women to join fraternities. So let's discuss it with radio host Ethan Behrman and Campus Reform contributor Emma Michel. Great to have you both with us tonight.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, I'm going to start with this. This is one of the plaintiffs who says why it's important that women should be allowed into the male fraternities at Yale.
Sororities don't tend to have nearly the same connections as fraternities. Fraternities often have people, I think, in higher positions of power, and certainly on campus they occupy a much higher social space.
So, Emma, the women say that they're at a disadvantage by not having the networking and the alumni and all those kinds of things that they would get if they could be in the frat.
Well, what this really boils down to is the Constitution. We have a constitutional right to freedom of association.